What? What are you talking about?
This is a shot of it. Yes, and the slides. Mic check, mic check. Oh. Mic check.
Check. Mic.
We're good? Thank you, Keenan. Hi, folks. Welcome to the 11:10 Google Day Table Talk, Google Suite Resource Management. I'm glad you're here. If you mistakenly came here, stay anyway. My name is Paul Vertusio, Paul Vertusio. I'm with Health Sciences Classroom Services. I'm the service coordinator. This is my colleague, Sean. Sean Bartlett. Who is a communication technician in our office, and so we are tag teaming today's talk. There are two parts. I'm the front end, and he's the back end. Think of us as a very fancy zebra costume horse. Okay, so having said that, I do want to say though that the content that we're covering here is pretty packed for the time we have. It exists in other talks during the day. There's somebody else giving a talk specifically about Data Studio, which we're going to introduce. There's somebody else giving a talk specifically about forms to sheets to apps, to the Google App Script that we're talking about here. So after we inspire you, we hope that you go off to those talks too to get some of the details. Having said that, so who are we? What do we need this for? What is Google Suite Management? It is basically the idea of using a variety of Google tools in our office to tell us where we need to be, when, with what piece of equipment. We are, for example, Classroom Services manages 47 classrooms in the Health Sciences District on the St. Paul campus. And what that pretty much means is we are in charge of making sure rooms are ready. We schedule the rooms for teaching and learning. We make sure that if there's a staff needed for video conferencing, a class from our campus to Duluth, that staff person is there. We make sure that there's a projector in the room if it needs it, extra microphones, that kind of thing. So we primarily support teaching and learning, and we also support administrative activities, meetings and such, as well as events. We have a lot of activity in our spaces. Just to give you an example of our workload, 2018 alone, we were involved in 400 plus WebEx sessions, so we direct supported about that many WebEx sessions. Some of it was as simple as, here's a little piece of equipment that allows our room AV to talk to your laptop, all the way up to maybe we had a student manage the WebEx for that particular event. There aren't that many days in a year. So, I mean, we were pretty busy just in terms of WebEx. The year prior, 2017, we were about 200. The year prior to that, we were just over 100. So you can sort of see there's climbing that we're experiencing. And now that Zoom is our tool, it's a lot easier to use. People are happier with it. We kind of imagine in our spaces that we're going to get more busy with video conferencing and webinar streaming. 104 instances of AV orientation. We have 47 rooms. We need to teach our users how to use them, particularly for first-time users or casual lecturers. 2018, that number is up from 2017. One of the interesting things, and this will come back when we think about metrics, we have what's also called on-site support. So AV orientation, we come to you 2 weeks, 3 weeks before your event, teach you how to use the room. On-site support, we're there 5 minutes before your event to help you fire up. Our on-site support was 100 plus in 2017, dropped down to 35 in 2018. But our AV orientation climbed. And the notion is that we were able to sort of capture the need a different way, teaching people how to use our rooms before they needed it so that they didn't need the on-site support the day of. There's only one of Sean. So he's essentially on-site support. So you can imagine, how hectic it can get if there are multiples of those. 162 microphones. We have had our microphones stolen. The year prior to that, we maybe had, 28 or so deployments of microphones. We're up to 162. The main reason is we've had to hide our microphones back, but that meant now that we needed to know when microphones needed to go out. So that was a new need. So we have quite a lot of a workload to sort of track resource-wise in terms of items, in terms of services, in terms of staffing. So what we're thinking of here, and I sort of want to give just a quick overview. Integrate Google where it makes sense. you don't necessarily, we use Google almost everywhere we can. I'm not saying that's the answer for everyone in this room, but we do think of it in terms of a process. So there's an input process, there's a process, it's very meta. What do we do? So input is the data, or the request, or the need. The process is what do we do to it, how do we manipulate it, transform it. We output it in such a way that it's useful and timely and accessible, and then we execute. So whoever is supposed to be getting at that content, how do they get to that content? In our world, we are using Google Forms for our inputs. We have what's called an AHC AV needs form. End users submit a form that we've designed telling us what they need, when, and where, in terms of services, in terms of equipment, in terms of staffing. The form, now if you're familiar with Google, forms go into Sheets, so that's just the repository place where the answers go. But we have added scripting to our Sheets that automates what happens to that data. Okay, and then that script outputs, now it's information. It's data turned into information, and we output it to Google Calendar so that it's shared with everyone in our office, and it's shared with people outside of our office, depending on what that calendar is, so that people have access to the info when they need it. And then we just use we use the either scripted notifications or built-in notifications to sort of let people know, okay, Sean has to be in that room at this time, I need to be in this room at this time, one of our students has to be in another room by that time. Now, I've given this talk before, I gave it last year. We've tweaked it since then, and one of our big tweaks is what Sean is going to bring to the table today. It's called Data Studio. Metrics is the process step. How do you know what you're doing is what you're supposed to be doing? We are using metrics in our office to sort of measure our, the amount of times a projector is asked for versus the amount of times a microphone is asked for versus the amount of times people are bringing their own computer. We're sort of measuring all that, and that tells us where do we need to sort of turn our attention. I already gave the example of AV orientation versus on-site support as an output, a work product of that effort. So our primary use case, I've sort of touched on this already, and jump in with any questions. I'm sort of speaking quickly because we don't have as much time as the previous sessions did. But thinking at the input phase, I've already sort of talked about this, AV requests via a Google form. It's just part of our Google Suite drive, so check it out if you haven't yet checked it out. I think, are most people familiar with forms, Google Forms? You can pretty much create your own forms. It could live just, the responses can live just in the form itself. The most basic level is you create a form, there's a response tab, right? But if you top right of that form, if you click send to a sheet, that's how you get to Google Sheets as a repository where then you can manipulate the data. And so that's this process bit. Let me just talk about this a little specifically. So it's going to Google Sheet, it's going to an app script. That app script creates an event in Google Cal based on the details. It can add a technician as a guest. It sends out email notifications depending on the request type. Now, I've got some nursing folks in the room, so I'm going to call you out a little specifically. We use it, we have a general resources calendar, so we have one calendar. We have a video conferencing calendar, that's our second one. We have a classroom reporting calendar, that's the third one. So depending on the request we get, the script I wrote automatically shunts events into the appropriate calendars. I'm calling out nursing because I know you use calendars for your years. Each batch of students has and so the courses that they attend are in that particular calendar. Am I understanding that correctly? So, theoretically speaking, you could be using forms that the faculty members of particular courses are using, and depending on the course, you know what batch they belong to, and depending on that batch, it goes into the calendar. So just the students who need to see it, and the students who don't need to see it, well, they don't see it. I think right now, most people manage their calendars very manually. They create an event or a series of events based off of an email they got from somebody. Is this correct? I see some nodding heads. The idea here is that we've got a standard form that we developed that then automates at the very minimum where things need to be. The next level for us is somebody says they needed video conferencing, and they also said they needed, so it goes to the video conferencing calendar. They also said they needed staffing, so then we need to add staff to this, and so we add staff as a guest, and they get an automatic notification.
Would you share these scripts, or because
absolutely.
Exactly what I need.
Yeah. And let me just show you. I do have that slide. I was wondering, wasn't sure if I was going to bring it up during Q&A or during the talk. Let's just bring it up right now. So This is a sheet that is, we're taking info from one of my forms. Timestamps requires the names, dates, recurrences, what are the needs, blah, 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 blah. The script looks like this for me. Now, I am not an advanced scripter, so I am just a bunch of if-thens. If they need classroom recording, send to this calendar. And you can sort of see the calendars look like this line, blah, 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 dot at groupcalendargoogle.com, right? All of our calendars have that particular name, so you can find them pretty easily in the settings. So this is, I think, one of the most useful basic steps for people who want to try automating their calendar use, particularly if they're managing multiple calendars. Down here is the string, the if-thens I use for, well, they wanted a projector, or they wanted a mic, or they wanted WebEx, which I now know I need to change that to Zoom. They wanted a DVD, which still kind of exists. So that kind of shunts the treatment. Now, I think there was somebody giving app scripts, an app script talk. So this is a good thing to sort of note in your notes to sort of visit with. And then here's my output. I just took a random week. This is a past week and this is much more exciting than what's going on this week. But you can sort of see this is what our workload looked like the week of April 22. We had some recordings going on for dentistry. We had some pharmacy ITVs going on. We were supporting some WebExes over here. So you can see anyone in our office could look at this calendar, this collection of calendars, and know who needs to be where, how busy are we getting. We know that this is going to, 24th is a particularly heavy day throughout the day, so we shouldn't do anything extra. We know that the 23rd is particularly dense between 10 and 1, so it's that kind of thing for us. Now, other departments may not have it necessarily as dramatic a calendar need, but still, if you're tracking resources in your office, like your conference rooms is the basic example, I'd like to think, for departments with conference rooms. This is one of the ways you can sort of help automate that management.
Check out equipment.
Check out equipment, absolutely. And there's another thing, I'm not going to give this talk now, but I do want everyone to sort of think about Google Room resources. So that's something to sort of note. What that means is we could attach a classroom recorder and give it its own Google Calendar, and therefore schedule it within Google Calendar. That's another level above this. So I didn't want to get there with this talk since we didn't have enough time, but that is something worth thinking about. But getting out of this for now, just to move on. Where are we at? And then service coordinators meeting. This is where we're living in calendar. I changed details in the description if I need to add things like IP addresses or WebEx names or Zoom names, that kind of thing. And then people really, by this point, the event exists and people are ready to sort of execute the plan, as it were. That's our primary use case. I did want to mention, did I move to the next slide? There we have it. Still thinking about process, we are moving on to we're changing our classroom recording capabilities, but generally speaking, can you imagine having to record 366 events in a single semester for a single course? Oh, sorry, for a single department. So dentistry alone is 366 recordings that we manage. We also do stuff for nursing. We do some stuff for pharmacy. We do some stuff for med school. We do a lot of events. Okay, so as you know, here at the University of Minnesota, we live in Astra. We live and breathe, or not breathe so much. It's by your.
Astra is like.
Okay, well.
Yeah.
So Astra is how our office schedules rooms. This is how we know where classes and events are supposed to be. It is for us our Bible. If it's not in Astra, it shouldn't be in our room. So, but Astra doesn't talk to anything. How do we get it into calendars where we then automate stuff, or into sheets where we then automate stuff? I'm talking about going to calendars at this point. Within Astra, there's a capability of outputting a CSV of your meeting patterns. So let's take nursing, you're not giving me a number, 5444. I'm just making that up.
Yeah.
So it happens to have meeting patterns all throughout. So I turn that into a CSV, I tweak it to make it Google friendly, just a couple of little tweaks. I can then import it into my calendar. So basically I'm going from the left side, which is what Astra looks like, and I'm going to the right side. For people who aren't taking notes, course and section becomes subject, for example. If I put subject there, Google will see it. Room becomes location. If I put location there, Google will see it. The start date, end date, start time, end time, those are perfect. I added a description field, and in this particular case, I threw in the live stream links that we do for courses, but it could be whatever. If you wanted to say the professors' names or any detail that you wanted to occur in the Google Cal coming out of Astra, at this point is when you would add it. And then I import it in the matter of, you know, I time myself 7 minutes is the quickest where I'm going from Astra into Google with a ton of meeting patterns. I could go quicker than that actually if it was just one basic meeting pattern, but I'm talking about the complex ones like dentistry or, you know, where you're in multiple rooms, multiple dates, multiple times, there's no pattern. It's the one where there's no patterns. Those are the ones that kill me because those are the ones where I make the mistakes. Are we good here? So this is the other bit. The other thing I wanted to touch on, Google Calendar to Zoom. This is new. Zoom is new to our campus. I was fortunate enough to be part of the team to sort of test pilot and find use cases for it, and I found a ton. I wanted to use this as a platform to say to folks who, if you're not getting into Zoom, get into Zoom, and when you get there, use your browser extensions. There's a Zoom browser extension for Chrome, and there's a Zoom browser extension for Firefox. There's not one for Safari that I know of. And if you do that from inside Google Calendar, I can schedule or start a Zoom meeting. I don't have to leave. If I'm living in Google Calendar, because that's where a lot of my work is, I can still stay there and make an event a Zoom meeting. I could add video conferencing to an event. Now you can already do this using Google Hangouts Meet. We know that Keynote was great. I love that we are now at a place where we have two competing tools, Google Hangouts Meet and Zoom, that are at parity, that they can both do the same thing and you can choose which one works for you, as opposed to the olden days, like Connect days, right, where you had some tools that got this high, and then if you wanted something better, you had to switch tools, and then you had to switch tools depending on function. Hangouts Meet and Zoom, they have parity. I'm a fan of both. I am talking about Zoom integration at this point, but the point is use the browser extensions. What I'm pointing out here is I created the event in Google Cal, but it appears in my Zoom profile. It just automatic talks. And so now why is that important? I'm again in that nursing calendar with 140 students. I don't really know if that's the size. I want them to all be able to hit this Zoom meeting, so I put it in their calendar instead of having to create an event and inviting 140 people to it. That's the first example. And I've made it a Zoom meeting right away with not much effort. The other thing I was going to talk about is you can sort of go the reverse. I am here in my Zoom, this down bottom left corner, where'd my mouse go? There it is. That's Zoom, and I've created an event, and by integrating my Google, so that's, if you haven't done that yet, I would suggest doing it. It then appears in my Google Calendar. So it's a two-way street, depending on where you want to live in this process. The fact of the matter is you can point your tools either way. Now, note, I've sort of branched a little bit away from the forms, sheets, app scripts, calendar thing, except that I'm landing in calendar, and that's kind of the important thing. I could, if I go back here, I could, instead of pushing it to calendars right away, I could push this into a Google Sheets after having tweaked it, and then run script on that and automate that as well. Now, for our office need, we don't need that need because I'm doing this course by course for classroom recordings. But you may have a need where you're managing multiple things in Astra. You don't want to just deal with one course, you want to deal with a bunch of courses, and then you want to automate where those events go. You could instead push this CSV into Google Sheets, run the app script on that, and then it automates into calendars, and the rest of the magic happens. Are we in a happy place? Okay, I'm going to turn the mic over to Sean, who's going to talk about the metrics part. Are we doing things the way we're supposed to be doing it? Yeah.
It does. So as Paul put it, I believe I would be the other half of the zebra costume.
Right.
Trying to hold it up. Yeah, and so what I'm trying to do with this dashboard in Data Studio is take all of these platforms that we're using, everything that's spread out across so many different places, and how can we simplify the information and house it in just one viewable document. So we have a lot of existing spreadsheets, and we try to run reports from all of our calendars, as well as a ticketing system that we use for on-site support. And it just all gets really spread out, and then we really only can allocate at the end of a semester or at the end of an academic or fiscal year. So then we can't really tell as much from the information as what we would like. So I created a really great visualization tool out of Google Data Studio, which does have a talk coming up at 11:50, given by Jay Nelson, just as a heads up. So Data Studio is just an all-in-one encompassing platform that you can sync with a wide variety of data sources. So it doesn't actually house any data. It's just a viewer tool that you can sync with Google Sheets, Google Analytics. There's a lot of third-party applications as well, but of course, as Paul said, we live mostly within Google. Once you've generated the report, it opens up just as an empty document, and you can drag and drop tables, build it to be sort of a web page, but without having to do any high-level coding. It is super intuitive. And then from there, you can distribute it just like a Google Doc as a link. Or it does have the option to embed into a web page if you want people to view it from your actual, say, your department website. And then once you've built this all, it is editable. It just has all of your data. We can put in several semesters, several years worth of data, and then the viewable format allows you to filter out the unnecessary dates if it's years old, or if you're only interested in certain departments, certain resources. So as far as we're using it, I'm going to try to speed up just a little bit because I think we're getting close to the end. We take information from our Google Calendars and from our ticketing system, and we put them into their own separate spreadsheets. And then we point all of the spreadsheets to our one Google Data Studio document. And then we primarily just use pivot tables, just as a really easy way to express, this room required this facilitation, or this department required this. It just makes it a lot cleaner. And this is a photo of what we have going on, but I will open up the link. Oh, yeah.
Oh, because I thought I had access.
Yeah,
Did you not give me access?
I did give you access. This is why. So we are in the one with
Oh,
the hat,
we're in
and now we
my-
need to get in the one that doesn't have the hat. We went over this yesterday.
Yeah.
Very well.
It's the no hat VPOL that has all the permissions.
Alrighty. So yeah, this is Data Studio, and you can see that I've got it set up to view essentially fall semester, but you can also have rotating through. You can view just the last 7 days from today. You can view. I like to leave our ticketing system in last week, starting Sunday. So when you're viewing the previous week, that gives me the ability to see where were our support calls going. Where on Tuesday morning, we can see that across the whole semester, Tuesday morning seemed to have been the time where just everything was happening. So we would get calls for just support of getting the system going on, or maybe something wasn't working, and that allows me on a weekly basis to check in and say, here's where I should try to maybe prevent these calls from happening. Because as much as we love responding to the calls, it'd be better if everything just worked for people. So that's a very useful tool. And then on a separate page, I have all of the resources that we've been talking about with Paul. And this, again, it's editable, and I can carve out certain time frames if I want. But then this other tool that I've set up to the right, if I can click on it. A little slow. So this is the list of all of the different facilitations that we do. So the AV orientations, the on-site support, WebEx, Zoom. Say that I just want to look at WebEx and Zoom side by side, so just our web conferencing platforms, and compare how do they get used against each other. And then that's my filter, and now I can limit the data. I don't need to know about all of the AV orientations that we were supporting when I'm trying to pull the numbers just for web conferencing. But then this does give me the ability, if I ran one report for all of the requests from WebEx, and then a different report for all the requests from Zoom, this allows me to just have it all in one place. And then I can break down using additional tables. I can say, how heavy were the days of the week. We can also say what department was using these platforms more. And then we also are trying to document the staffed time that we spend. So did we just show up and turn things on and leave? Did we schedule a student worker to help facilitate the entire event? And this is all stuff that if you were to look at a Google Sheet and someone who's not a part of your department but doesn't need to see all of the notes, doesn't need to see everything, that's a lot of information that we really want to be able to filter out and just simplify it. So Data Studio has been a very useful tool. And then the back end here, when you share the link, if it hasn't been shared for the editable version, people will just view the information and the filters are all they can change. But this is a little bit of what the back end looks like. And they will get deeper into this in about 15 minutes here in a different room. So I'm not going to go too heavy into it, but this list of available fields off to the side, these are all just headers that I had in the spreadsheet. And all I had to do in order to get this table set up is after creating a table. So just in this area, you add a chart, you add a date range, all the options, and then you just drag whatever you wanted to see. So I want to see the department by the facilitations. It's a drag and drop view of everything that was already existing in the spreadsheet, but now it's an easily shareable platform. I think this is a good time to assess where
Any,
kind of at the end.
absolutely, yeah, no, that was great. Were there any questions or follow-ups that people wanted? This, presentation, by the way, I think is linked on the website, so you can certainly access it there. It doesn't make the zebra reference, but it makes every other reference. But if there are no questions, we appreciate the time and the attention. We hope it was useful to you, and we do encourage, check out the other, Mallory Patrow's got a presentation using forms and sheets. Jay Nielsen's got the other Data Studio, and there's somebody else doing calendaring, so it all comes together like magic. All right, thank you.
Rooms where you do the recording, how do you set that up? Do you have a laptop when you run the room, or I mean, how is it set up?
Right, so
hardware-based recorders, media site is a current solution, and we're gonna be switching to Winout, so if you have a recorder, Winout, W-I-N-O-T. Winout is great, that's the reason why we have.
I know.
Right now, the media site, I have to manually program media site separately in Google Cal. But because of automated Google Cal, I know that Google Cal's correct. As long as I match and matching, my media site Google Cal, we're good. When I go to Winout, the last version of the work is correct in Google Cal automates the Winout work. So it tells the recorder to start